Okay, hello everyone. So this is the final part of your um, collaborative workbook for this week's session. I'll try and make this as quick as possible. Obviously, judging by the number of views of last week's YouTube clip, I think a lot more of you will be looking at part A and part B a bit more closer to the time before your lesson plans are due. Please make sure you do watch it because it will help you avoid any errors that that a lot of students make in putting their lesson plans together. Now, so you're up to the last part of the collaborative research of the collaborative workbook, which is looking at Area Study 3 student-directed research investigations and how to write a detailed rubric. Now, most of the rubrics that you would usually see in high school are something along these lines. For a student-directed research investigation for Units 1 and 2, remember that they are given, say for example, one of them is they choose a question and they have to investigate that question by looking up past research on it and essentially writing up an investigation on researching that question. So they have to know key psychological concepts. So if they're looking at social cognition, or whether it be that they're looking at the brain or emotions, whatever it is, if it's social cognition, then they should be talking about attitudes, attributions. They should be looking at stereotypes, prejudice, discrimination, all the types of discrimination. And so in that knowledge of key psychological concepts, they're expected to do quite a lot and define quite a lot. So that criteria is pretty general. Understanding of appropriate scientific evidence, so being able to talk about what each prior research has found and the evidence that's been produced and whether hypotheses have been supported or not. Evaluation of that scientific research and knowledge of effective scientific communication. That's a very basic rubric, and you would normally hear tick, if it's really good for that, you tick here, or if it's medium, you tick, and so on and so forth. And if it's very low or really not shown, you'd probably tick the last box and then give them a mark out of 20. But these sorts of rubrics require you to have a whole section here at the bottom of the page that requires some extensive comments or feedback, because these rubrics are really basic. So to put together a detailed rubric, let's have a look at exactly what each of these criterion actually are assessing. Okay, so when we break it down, let's have a look at what each of these umbrella headings look at. The first one, knowledge of key psychological concepts. So we're looking at definitions of key terms, appropriate scientific language and conventions, discussion of social, economic, cultural, and ethical considerations relevant to the research question. For understanding of appropriate scientific evidence, this one here, we're looking at strong evidence to support the questions discussed, relevant links between theory and evidence, consideration of validity and reliability of evidence. And again, they're using all of those sorts of key terms that students are required to understand for the research methods component of Unit 1 and 2. The evaluation of scientific research, evaluation of issues, evidence, concepts, and appropriate conclusions that are drawn in that past research. And knowledge of effective scientific communication, the accuracy of scientific communication. Let's see if I can try and make that a bit bigger for now. Accuracy of scientific information presented, clarity of the ideas expressed in terms of importance and implications for future research, and the appropriateness of their writing for audience and purpose. Okay, so they should be able to structure it in the way that you see fit. Now, as you would know, all of the criteria for your university assignments have all of these boxes filled with lots and lots of writing. And that can seem daunting to need to fill those boxes. But there's a really easy way of doing it that I'm going to show you how to do now. So for example, all I do is copy and paste all the way through. I'm only going to do the first line because you're going to do all the rest. which seems like a lot, but it's not going to take you long. For very high, consider the following words: outstanding, excellent, admirable, eloquent, something through, idiot. Thorough, insightful, thoughtfully considered, etc., etc. Now, I just need to put these where appropriate for my very high box. So, I might write excellent use of appropriate and correct definitions of key terms. Thoughtful and eloquent use of appropriate scientific language and conventions. Insightful discussion of social, economic, cultural, and ethical considerations relevant to the research question. So you can see here, these are the things that, hold on. These are the things I've added in. Why can't I just highlight that? Where's my highlighter? Thoughtful and eloquent. Insightful. Okay. So, I just need to tone these yellow bits down a notch for high because it's still really good. Okay? And rather than writing excellent, very good, good, satisfactory, and unsatisfactory, which you can do for those, but let's try and think outside the square a little bit. Might say, we might say, great use of appropriate definitions of key terms. Considered, let's do well considered. Well considered use of appropriate language and scientific conventions. Great. Well considered. Go away. And interesting discussion. It's all still really, really positive words. All still very good. Medium, here we can tone it down again. And we can say mostly appropriate definitions of key terms. Use of clear and appropriate scientific language and convention. See here, I'm not actually changing this one this much because that's the basic criteria over here. And if you're doing something in the basic or average form, it'll stay sort of as is. And sound discussion of social Okay. And mostly use of clear and appropriate. Okay, here we'll do some use of appropriate definitions and key terms. Scientific language and conventions. Incorporated and followed sometimes, and a general. Okay, so we go here to being it's quite general. full use of the word sometimes, and again, some use. And then here we get nasty. Little reference to definitions of key terms, scientific language and conventions, either not shown or used incorrectly and or out of context, and a little mention. Okay, so you can see here that once we have our understanding of what each criteria includes, or what's meant to be considered in each criteria, we can actually write a really detailed criteria. And then when the students complete their work, instead of ticking, we can circle or circle in between, and we can potentially underline certain elements of these. If they've excellent use of appropriate definitions of key terms, we might underline this whole area. And then if it was not an insightful but it was still an interesting discussion, we might underline this area and circle half and half, and they get a 4.5 for that criteria. Anyway, you guys are going to attempt to do the same for this one. Remember to just cut and paste and alter the wording. Okay, where the commas are usually two distinct points. So after each comma should be a different describing word. Okay, so use a describing word here and use a describing word here in between these two. So wherever there's a comma, that's certainly, for example, the last one. Accuracy of scientific information presented is one idea. Clarity of the ideas expressed in terms of importance and implications for future research is another idea. And appropriateness for audience and purpose is another idea. So all of those will need some little yellow bits of wording in between. Have a crack, see how you go, and what it does is it saves you with this whole comments and feedback of you guys having to write a whole heap of feedback on every criterion for each student. So it saves you marking time. Okay, good luck, and any problems, send me an email. Bye.